Housing affordability has become one of the most pressing global economic challenges of our time, especially for young people. Despite sky high interest rates designed to cool the real estate markets, housing costs continue to spiral upward, putting the dream of homeownership further out of reach for millions. And we're going to go through the list of this countries in which this has been impacted the worst, where housing affordability has gotten worse over the last 10 years. And number 3 surprised me quite a bit. So stick around for that.
So from the United States to Portugal and Canada to the Netherlands, a perfect storm of constrained supply and relentless demand has pushed housing markets to their breaking point. So in America, we're approaching levels of unaffordability that have not been seen since just before the 2007 crisis. Crazy.
Great year for real estate. Today, we're going to dive deep into the data to explore how housing affordability has evolved across OECD countries since 2015. We'll uncover which nations have seen the most dramatic price increases, analyze the key drivers of these trends, and examine what it means for aspiring homeowners around the world. Stay tuned as we map out one of the most significant economic shifts of our generation, which is the global housing affordability crisis. And Dave, you're going to read this list for me, which is basically, maybe we'll do the top 10, 15 countries and their house price to income ratio and how much it has changed from 2015 to 2024.
All right. Before I get into that, for my followers out there, I'm going to explain this to you, what home price to income ratio is with crayon. All right. So stick with me on this one. So the home price to income ratio is a straightforward metric that shows how affordable or unaffordable housing is relative to what people earn. Okay, it's calculated by dividing the median price in a given area by the median annual household income there. So the result is a number that tells you how many years of income it would take to buy a typical home outright, assuming no other costs or financing. Okay, historically, it's one of the go-to ways to gauge whether housing markets are balanced or if they're getting way out of whack, which is too high, and it signals a bubble or a squeeze on buyers. Too low, and it might mean undervalued properties or economic stagnation. So, for example, in the median home price in the city, let's say, is $300,000, and the median household income is $75,000. The ratio is 4. So that means that a typical home costs 4 times the typical yearly income. So back in the 1970s, 1980s, a ratio of 2.5 to 3 was considered quote unquote normal. In the US, the benchmark where most families could afford a home with a mortgage without stretching too thin today, though the numbers crept up nationally, as of late 2024, the ratio is hovering around 5.5 to 6. Okay, so depending on whose data you trust, like the National Association of Realtors or Freddie Mac, in pricey spots like San Francisco, New York, it's more like 10 to 12, while cheaper rural areas might be closer to 3 to 4. You're welcome. Now, all the listeners just know,
great
right?
Explanation.
And not bad, dude. Not bad, honestly. Now everyone's on the same page. We're all following along. This is fun. We're learning. Dave's going to be the one that's explaining all these crazy metrics and short-term abbreviations for you. Let's get to the list.
Let's do it.
Well, before we get into the list, actually, no, you know what? Let's go to the list. All right. Country ranked and home price to income ratio changed from 2015 to 2024. Okay.
So this is how much worse the metric that you just explained got from in the past 10 years. So how much less affordable has housing got in the past 10 years in that country?
Number 1 is the worst, or number 1 is the best?
The worst.
Oh, we're starting at the bottom. I like it. Number 1, drum roll, Portugal, right, at 58%. Oh, number 2, Canada at 37%. Number 3, United States, 30%. Number 4, Netherlands, 30%. 5, Switzerland, 27%. 7, I'm on 7 here.
6.
Czechia, 6. 24%. There you go. Australia, 22%. Luxembourg, 20%. Ireland, 18%. Slovenia, 18%. Greece, 17%. Spain, 17%. Austria, 16%. Estonia, 15%. Hungary, 14%, Japan 12%, Norway 10%, and Germany 7%. Crazy. Canada, US,
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah, and I mean, like to me, it is pretty wild that the U.S. Has seen the third worst housing affordability decline in the world, and from my perspective, I think that that's a really big reason why it's not the kind of market you want to be investing in right now. It's hard to really build a thesis around saying, hey, I'm buying this product that I'm hoping it'll produce rent and go up in value, yet nobody can afford to buy it off of me in today. Like if I bought it and then, I take it out to the market and I try and sell it, nobody can buy it, right? There's so many bad data points in the US right now, right?
Right.
First time home buyers, that one from NAR that we talked about, right?
Yeah, what,
20 only
24%?
27% of the
27.
buyers in the US market right now are first time home buyers. I think the lowest they've ever had, if I'm
And
not
what's the
mistaken. Do you
median
remember that data
age?
point?
Yeah, I think it was 24%, but I'll fact check us. And then the median age increased to what, like high
Here, it's
50s,
right
right?
here.
Or
First time homebuyers shrink to historic low of 24% as buyer age hits a record high.
dude,
So
give me
your
the
first
dub on
time
that one. Give me the
buyers,
win
yeah,
on the 24.
yeah, you did. You got it. You've
Dude,
got all the data points now. You're
dude,
like a
I
mini me, except you're
call
way
me
larger. You're jacked. So
Daniel Foch Jr., baby.
there was a chart though that showed it, which was awesome. I'm gonna try and find that chart. But yeah, I mean, your median home buyer is 56 years of age now.
Crazy.
50, or it's actually, yeah, your median age for first time buyers is 56, 38 for first time buyers, and it was 35 last year. So basically, people aren't able
Wow.
to buy their houses in the U.S. now until they're like in their 40s. And a lot of this, a lot of people talk about this as if it's like, oh yeah, corporations are buying up all the properties and stuff. It's like, well, that's probably a component, but it's not the component. The component is people have to buy with a 7% interest rate right now, and house prices haven't really come down since COVID in the US, right?
Right. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess the key things that we want to look at here, in the global overview, is this housing inflation persistence despite high interest rates. And we touched on this a little bit in the UBS bubble index, but we're
Right.
seeing continued price growth in a lot of markets, especially in the US. Canada, not so much, although in certain areas, and Portugal, who's number one on the list,
Right.
more so. And so the question becomes why, right? And we just discussed the golden visa episode, how that's really distorted markets in places like Portugal and Spain. And I think one of the big issues that the Western world is battling right now is you're seeing a lot of flight of capital out of other places on Earth that are looking for places to go in the US and Canada, in Europe. And I think we have more, you were talking about like divisiveness, right? There's more political divisiveness. People are just like leaving the countries they're in hopes that
Right.
they can find something better elsewhere, and they're taking their money with them. I know a lot of Canadians who have gone to Portugal and Spain, right, because they aren't happy with the tax environment or political environment here. I know a lot of Americans who've moved their money to Canada. I know a lot of Canadians who've moved their money to Mexico, right? Like, I don't think like global capital flows, it feels like they're super, like, I don't know if I'm wrong here, but it feels like they're like just supercharged right now. Like everyone's moving
I
money
agree.
somewhere. Am I wrong? You feel that too, right?
No, I feel that too. I think it's just also becoming more of like a social norm, you know? I think moving money outside of your home country used to be something that was not as common, but with how accessible information is nowadays and how the world is moving, I think people have access to all this information and data that shows and allows them to maybe make different investments and invest outside of their home country without it being such a huge concern or a huge unknown. Now they have the information to make a known investment and a safe investment, right?
For sure. Yeah, I think there's some supply constraints as well. Like, we haven't, because we've seen so much inflation over the last little bit. The construction costs have gone up substantially, and builders aren't building. Builders
Right.
have more expensive lumber, more expensive labor, more expensive interest rates on their projects, and so they're not super compelled to build, right? And so that's keeping supply tight in a lot of these markets, and a lot of them are growing markets, right? Population's growing in Canada and Portugal and the U.S. and um, if the markets aren't being supplied, then you're going to be keep being in a state of excess demand, and that'll push prices up, right? And then finally, I think the one piece is like that impact of institutional investors and cash buyers and foreign capital, right? So we discussed this on the Golden Visa episode, but I think you have a lot of, as soon as you get foreign capital playing in the domestic real estate market, you kind of get to the point where there's a player in the market who isn't fully incentivized to be rational, right? Like we saw this in Canada. It's like if you're money laundering or if you're trying to hide your capital from your domestic government, you don't care
Right.
if your property loses money or if you overpay for it, right? It just has to
Right.
fulfill that other purpose for you. Yeah.
I want like when I'm just gonna.
Do you want to dive into the top three markets here for me?
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so Portugal number one. Let's cover the Portugal crisis. So 157% price increase from 2020 to 2021. Now the
Crazy.
average in that's crazy, man. 157%. Then the average, and we talked about this in the Golden Visa episode, but I feel like the people that were moving here to Portugal weren't moving here to contribute to the economy. They were more so moving here to retire or, like I'm actually curious, and maybe I'll try to pull it up, but what the percentage of the buyers that moved to Portugal, first of all, where they're from and what they're doing for work and, where their income is coming from, probably jobs in the US, I would assume. So 157% price increase, right?
Yeah, I think you saw you were seeing like a lot of remote work. Like there was a huge,
Right.
huge, like similar to what you're seeing in Tulum, a lot of remote
Right.
work folks going to Portugal to buy properties because it was a sick place to live, like a really nice place to live during COVID, when there was lockdowns. It was like, just go, and if you're going to go and post up somewhere with a beach and a view of the ocean, and cheap.
Of course. Yeah, exactly. And the cost of living is a fraction. But so the average in Portugal, the average income context is about €1,000 per month. Now, here are the government's proposed solutions. So rent control measures in major cities, tax incentives for affordable housing development, more housing program targeting 100,000 new units, restrictions on short-term rentals and golden visas, which I think we're going to see a lot of all over. This is actually coming into effect in Mexico as well. Restrictions on short-term rentals. It was too easy to obtain. Basically, you had to buy a property, put it on Airbnb, take some pictures, and you're good to go, and you have an Airbnb. But if you're adding these restrictions, it can obviously help ease the pain of what they're going through. Same here as in Mexico, to be honest. And simplified building permit processes. Now, let's get into the Canadian market analysis. So a 65% price jump from 2020 to 2022, a 17% correction from the peak, which we're feeling a lot right now. Supply shortage parallels with the U.S. market. So both countries face severe housing deficits, municipal zoning restrictions, limiting development, construction, labor shortages impacting new builds, rising material costs affecting development of viability, urban growth boundaries constraining like available land. In Canada, well, I'm going to speak for Toronto. I think I actually talked about this on my social media this morning. There's a huge in Toronto, there's big inventory of like the new build condos, but the one thing that Toronto is missing is an inventory of like good properties, especially in the condo market. I'm not sure, like there's a huge amount of inventory on the market. Incredible. I think do you know the number off the top of your head? You probably know like what we're seeing.
It's like 10,000 condo units. Yeah. Well, it depends on if you're using Treb or Toronto, but yeah, it's record high.
Right.
We haven't had, we've never had this many condos for sale as an example.
The thing is though, it's crazy. It's like most of those, they're not great properties. Just not to shit on anybody's investment, but they're
Yeah.
not great. They're super small, new build condos. People don't want that, anyways. So that's kind of one of the things we're seeing here in the Canadian market. U.S. market insights number 3. So a record high 407,000 average price point. Sales volume is at a 20-year low. Home buyer sentiment at GFC levels. I've seen a bunch of Twitter comments about home buyer sentiment, like a terrible, terrible spot.
Yeah, I'll pull up
And the
the chart
focus
on
on,
it.
yeah, fire that up. So, okay, those are our top 3. And it's kind of like we're all in the same boat, all top 3. We're all facing similar issues, to an extent,
Yeah,
obviously.
for sure. I mean, again, I think that this is really that it's really that thing where the Western world they're all playing the same playbook, right? And the playbook
Right.
is, hey, we're gonna increase our population by increasing, or we're gonna grow our economies by increasing population. And a lot of people would like kind of argue that, capitalism sort of like predicated on this. Like it needs to be growing to, like the world needs to be growing for the economy to be growing.
Right.
Inflation, like 2% inflation target, is similar to like what your historic targets for population growth would be. But yeah, you've got your home buyer sentiment basically falling off of a cliff. There's some other charts basically showing that it's at GFC levels. I would say the same thing in Canada and in a lot of these unaffordable markets. And it's not like sentiment isn't bad because people don't believe in the asset. It's because people can't afford the asset, right? Like
Right.
people just can't afford to buy houses in any of these countries, and so when they can't afford to, they're not going to, right?
Right.
That's like it's not
Right.
rocket science.
Right.
And so yeah, so that's kind of from my perspective the key, one of the key challenges. I think if we, there's a couple of markets where there's some success stories, right? If we go to the bottom of that list and look at some of the markets where they've seen improvements in affordability, and we can discuss sort of what's going on there, right? So if we go back to that list, let me just pull it up here.
Pull it
I think
up.
at the bottom you've got countries like Romania, Finland, and Italy. We could probably kind of look at markets like that. I mean, Italy's a really interesting one simply because of their population's been
Stagnant.
in contraction. Well, yeah, it's basically they've seen no population growth. Actually, their population's been falling. So again, like if we're just going back to the thesis that population growth has been what's been driving these markets up,
Right.
um, it's plausible. Like let's look at Italy or Japan as an example, right?
Right. I can
Italy and
see
Japan
here.
have both seen improvements in housing affordability, except for in Tokyo, which is like the biggest city in the world, right?
Right.
But Japan, same thing, aging population, right? And I guess the bigger question becomes, does this become a
I'm gonna
trend that we
try.
need to watch for globally as we start to see the whole population of the world potentially decline, as you've got like China, um, India now both falling below the replacement rate, right?
Right.
Um,
We talked that replacement rate on the last episode.
mhm.
I think if I remember, I could be wrong. The U.S. is at like a 1.9. Is that what it said? 1.9. So this is why Italy's population is declining. It's just due to like low birth rates and the
Yeah,
aging society. The country's fertility rate has been sliding for decades at 1.2 in 2023, and so anything below 2.1, 2.1 is like the median. Um, yeah, crazy. Let's see here. Last year, only 379,000 babies were born, the lowest since Italy unified in 1861, while deaths were 661,000, leaving a natural deficit of over 280,000. That's just like no one leaving or coming. Um, interesting.
yeah, 100%.
Interesting.
I mean, you look at countries like Italy. Like Italy is such a good example because I mean, in Italy they have this I think it's a really fascinating case study on housing affordability. It's a beautiful place to live. Like, it's not hard to convince people to go and live in Italy, right? Amazing food, beautiful, landscape, nice people. Um, and yet in Italy, they have this, €1 house
I
initiative,
was
right? Where
just
they're
gonna
basically,
bring that up.
yeah. So these programs are in small towns and villages across Italy, typically not in your, waterfront, like it's not on the Amalfi Coast, right? But, um, you know, especially in regions, small villages in regions like Sicily, Calabria, and Sardinia, which is, potentially an opportunity, but also a symptom of the big demographic challenges that Italy's seeing, right? So
Right.
properties are often offered for these symbolic prices. They're basically free, but they have a symbolic price of, €1. But buyers must commit to renovating the properties within 3 years, right? So they're trying to bring some industry back, and they're trying to get people to, hire local contractors and resurrect the local economy, but also not let these houses sit in a state of disrepair. And you
Right.
typically would need a security deposit as well of about €5,000. So you're not really getting it for free per se, but
I'm
still,
looking at it
I
now.
mean,
Yeah, the
$55,000
$1
euro max cost, right?
crazy. The $1 euro
Yeah,
homes were small towns. Basically, they're selling abandoned properties for next to nothing. They're real, but they're more about like reviving dying villages, like you just said. Not handing out. They're not handing out residency.
yeah,
There's no golden visa attached to a $1 purchase. Let's see, places like Sambuca in Sicily, or I can't even say that, in Sardinia, offer these deals to attract buyers who renovate the homes, often spending between like 20,000, 50,000 to fix them up, and boost local economies. The catch is you have to commit to the repairs within a few years. But nowhere in these schemes do they promise a visa or anything like that, just to clear that up. Watch our last episode about the golden visa. Yeah, interesting.
yeah. So I think Japan has some similar stuff going on. They have another intriguing case, based on they have these, IKEA, or empty house phenomena, they call it. So as of
Where is
2024,
this?
Japan has over 8 million abandoned homes, in Japan, and Japan's a little bit of a different one, right? Because in Japan, they they don't have immigration, right? Like, Italy's not opposed to immigration, um, but they haven't necessarily been able to grow it because there's not a ton of economy going on there, and so people don't feel good economic prospects. But, in Japan, they don't allow a ton of people to immigrate there, right? Like, their immigration
Right.
basically has been zero. It's very hard to get a permanent residency there. And so, the question becomes, does this, do these IKEAs, we'll have to do a whole episode on these because this article is pretty awesome, but it's like they're starting to gain the attention of overseas buyers, according to the CNBC article,
Right.
where there was a rising trend of inquiries from abroad and people who basically want to buy them. Um, a lot of it because of the pandemic, remote work trends, and shifting lifestyle preferences. And Japan's such a beautiful country as well, right? So you've got Italy and Japan, right?
Right.
Two countries that have, in Japan, 8 million empty houses. I don't know how many empty houses there are in Italy. I'll look it up. But to me, this is just like, like, the fact that this is a thing, and they've got housing affordability crises in other places on earth is remarkable to me. 9 million empty
I'm
houses in
reading
Japan.
up. Yeah, that's crazy. It says here, I'm reading up on this as well on IKEA. It's like the catch is the process. Many IKEA are listed on IKEA banks, local government sites, pushing to repopulate rural spots. So some want you to live there full time, not just flip it or use it as a vacation pad. And that can clash, obviously, with visa rules if you're not already set up in Japan. Buying doesn't get you residency either. You're still capped at the 90-day tourist visa unless you've got a work or a spousal visa lined up. Plus, the listings are obviously in Japanese, so you might need to hire a local agent. Um, that's interesting. We got to do a whole episode on these, man.
Yeah, for sure. I think we should on Italy. We should get like an Italy and Japan expert on to talk about this with us, um, on those two markets. Because I think, if you look at like,
Unreal.
Italy's seen an improvement in housing affordability, right? So housing affordability
Right.
houses have become 13% more affordable, right? So your house price to income has gone down
Wow.
13% over the last 10 years. France, very similar, down 6%, right? Finland down 19%, Romania down 44%. Italy's
44%
just like the one
Romania.
that fascinates me because it's like, it's warm, like it's like it, like
Right.
everywhere else on this list, it's like, a lot of the ones where it's gone up. Oh, I think a lot of that has to do with that COVID exodus, right? Portugal up
Right.
58%, Spain up 17%. A lot of it is that Australia up 22%. Canada is obviously an outlier. I don't know what's going on there. We can just ignore them for now. But um, you know, what are the Italy's and Japan's of the world? I guess Japan's seen a 12% increase, but 12% is nothing compared,
Right.
right? Like 12% is nothing compared to 30% increase in house price to income, like the US.
Right.
South Korea down 17% house price to income. Um, I don't know, man. What's your thought? Like,
I'm deep into Romania right now. 44%. I'm trying to find out why, but
yeah,
it's not giving me much.
guy's gonna go
Like you
full
said.
Andrew Tate here.
Oh, I forgot. That's it. I'm moving. Me and
Just move
Tate
to a
are moving
Romanian
to.
prison.
That's right, man. I think it's kind of one of the things that interests me the most is that like it seems, you know, it's not. It's a global thing. All of us, a lot of the countries are going. Not all, obviously, but a lot of the countries are going through the same issues, and these
Mm-hmm.
rising prices are caused from the same stem issue. And now we're all kind of like paying the repercussion from the one stem issue, and it seems like it's across the board for the most part, which is cool to see.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I guess we'll have to do some follow up episodes on some of these other countries, what they're doing. I mean, Korea very similar. Actually, there was some news out of Korea. Their birth rate just went up for the first time in like years, and
Korea's birth
marriages
rate.
are up. But yeah,
Okay.
Korea's
Japan's is
birth rate just
down.
went up.
Japan's
But
down
yeah, I mean,
1.26.
but yeah, um, yeah, it says South Korea's policy push springs to life as the world's lowest birth rate rises. Um, but yeah, I think you know a lot of these countries are battling that aging population, right? I think that's the key thing here.
Right.
Is you can't really like how do you offset that? I think it ends up being deflation, or you replace the population with new people, which a
Right.
lot of countries have been trying to do, and it doesn't seem to be going very well, to tell you the truth. Like for
But
most of
like
the
you
Western
said,
world, right?
for how is Italy struggling with that? It's something that we have to look into, and we'll have to do a full episode on this because, to me,
Like why isn't Italy
right,
getting a ton of immigration compared to the rest of
right.
Europe? I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not
I
really
wonder if
sure.
it's house prices. Like maybe the house prices are just already out of reach in certain major cities. That doesn't make sense. Um, or maybe the purchasing process is just too in depth, or there's too many loopholes or something. But I think that we could do honestly a whole episode on that because it doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, like just quickly looking it up, seems like it's a much more complex bureaucratic process compared to other countries in the EU. So longer wait times for residence permits.
Right.
It probably has the most difficult path to citizenship, and there's pretty complex employment regulations for foreign workers. Whereas you get places like the UK, Germany, France, etc. Um, a lot of those places, like there's a lot of illegal immigration that kind of just goes unchecked
Right.
as well. Um, the economic barriers are pretty significant as well. So lower average wages compared to Northern European countries like the UK, Germany, etc. Higher unemployment rates. So you're not going to get the jobs you'd really have to be like a remote worker. And
Right.
there are limited job opportunities in the rural areas where those $1 houses, there's basically nothing going on there, right?
Yeah.
And
It's super
so,
small rural towns. Dude, we can start
yeah.
a podcast
So
studio up there.
I'm down.
Perfect.
Yeah. I mean, for sure. I got everything I need. Like as long as I got my family with me, I'm good. I don't need much. Maybe like
That's it.
like a Target, right? That's my other
Target.
Target shout out.
That's right. We gotta get Target on that to sponsor the apps here. The
Yeah.
That's a dad thing though, man. I don't think I've been in the Target in. Do we even have Target in Canada anymore? No.
No, that was like that was one of the best real estate blunders ever. Actually, we should cover that on like that was they literally lost like $1 billion just trying to enter Canada and left within like 2 years.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember. Uh, Crazy.
yeah, yeah. I think Italy, like another piece too, is you get a lot of like African migrants going to Europe because it's close, right? They'll just cross the Mediterranean or whatever,
Right.
and a lot of them are French or British colonies, and so they already speak English or French, and so they'll go there because the language barrier is
Right.
is more simple, whereas Italy is a more distant language, and they don't have a ton of English speaking services. Um,
I, I think like a
yeah,
lot we talked about. I think a lot of it boils down to like the ease of getting in and the ease of the process, right? Like, if it's a complex process to get visas, a complex process to purchase and get in, obviously that's going to, you know, make people not want to buy there.
for sure,
Interesting.
for sure.
Cool.
Anything else you think we need to cover in this one?
Man, I'm just excited for the next episodes now. We got to talk about Romania. We got to talk about South Korea. And we got to talk about Italy. We got 3 new episodes to cover and dive into.
Yeah,
I
we
think
got to
that's
do a
kind of
whole
really cool.
and Japan. I think we need to do a whole episode. We got to find some experts in Japan and Italy to talk to us about these like $1 houses in all these countries for sure, for
The
sure, for sure.
8.5 million abandoned houses in Japan is crazy. We need to get to the bottom of this immediately.
And whether or not it's a good idea to buy them. Like there's a whole
Right.
article on it that I had pulled up there. Yeah,
Dude, I zoned out. The last 10 minutes here, I've been reading on IKEA. I'm not going to lie. I'm in Grok right now. Me
you're
and Grok
buying.
are having a full.
In the last 10 minutes, I bought one on eBay. Like just toss
I
it on the
don't.
Amex. Like
I'm just
I
using
think
ChatGPT to translate English to Japanese. I'm negotiating as we speak with a live deal. I
just
got a whole
literally,
condo complex for $35.
yeah,
Perfect.
done.
Did you want to rent it?
Well, yeah, I'm down. Sure, why not?
What's the
Move my
cap
whole
rates?
remote work family over there.
That's right.
Yeah, no, this was good. I think like it's given us a lot of jumping off points for what's going on in other countries, and now like I'm actually super intrigued on exploring these a little bit more. Like what's going on with these Akita in Japan? What's going on with these empty houses in Italy? How do we get them? Are they a good investment? Is it actually worth it, or is it too good to be true? Like it sounds. So stay tuned for us to do follow ups on those. And until next
Oh,
time, please give us a follow, hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you're on. Leave us either a comment or a review. Share this with one person if you could. That'd be lovely. And follow us on social media as well. We're on Instagram, TikTok, all that other stuff, and we post like lots of videos and whatever. We're on YouTube, so if you want to watch us do this, I know it's kind of hard to look at our faces.
all
We're
the
more
platforms.
audio folk, but we do have these in video on Spotify and YouTube. So that's about it. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next week.